One.
And so how long have you been an atheist?
Well, I was a Christian, but then I was a Catholic, but then I got tired of this and read some works about atheism. That's how I became an atheist.
Was there any particular author or book that was influential in you deciding to adopt atheism?
I just researched atheist philosophy, and then that's how I became an atheist, I guess.
Are you or Pac-Man opening to hearing an absolute refutation of atheism?
I guess.
I can show you that atheism is incoherent and self-contradictory. Okay.
Can I ask questions along the way? Because I might not understand.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
So I've already disclosed I am a Christian. I'm a fundamentalist evangelical.
Yeah, I know. I know. You left the politics server.
Okay, so anyway, I'll use the word dabble, because in philosophy and theology and apologetics, and atheism is a big passion of mine ever since I came onto the internet. Okay, and I have conversed and debated with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of atheists. Okay, now I'll just cut to the chase. Atheism is a self-contradiction and incoherent because it violates its own central principle without knowing it. Atheism, the atheist position, is that either God does not exist or one does not accept the God claim. Okay? Now, the problem with that is there is no position of neutrality. If you do not accept that a personal absolute creator God exists, then by default, you will be operating, from a model of reality that is God-free and is in virtue of an impersonal absolute that provides for all dependency states. Okay? Now, if I say anything that you don't understand and you want me to go over or unpack it further, please do not hesitate to ask, because sometimes these are new ideas and they're not, sometimes it takes a little thought to understand it. So belief in God is to believe in a personal absolute and ultimacy of reality that everything is derived from and depends upon. If you deny that or you lack belief in that, whether you realize it or not, you will by default believe that there is an impersonal absolute as to why anything exists at all and why everything that begins to exist has its origin in or reference point. Okay?
Absolute.
All right.
What's an absolute in this concept?
And the absolute is whatever, it's singular, not plural. The absolute is whatever is the reason why anything at all exists. And that
You're explaining it better now I can.
Okay, so the absolute is that which is the reason why anything at all exists, and the absolute is unconditionally non-dependent and provides for all dependency states, or it provides for everything that begins to exist. So everybody is going to believe, consciously or unconsciously, that something is absolute. We'll either believe the absolute is personal, and we call that God, or we'll be operating from the position of an impersonal absolute from which everything is derived. So an atheist believes in an impersonal absolute.
So does it matter how you define God? I mean, does it matter how you define God? Because, I mean, there are thousands of different definitions of God. And
right, but what we're getting, well, those are peripheral differences for the sake of discussion. We haven't even gotten to that yet. Okay, those are secondary characteristics of the absolute. What I'm focusing on is what the core attribute of God is. The core attribute of God, or definition, is God would be that which is absolute, ultimate, and the reason why anything exists at all, and that absolute possesses the attribute of personhood. The atheist says, I don't accept that, right? But you have to keep in mind, the atheist is not in a position of neutrality. If you do not accept that the absolute is personal or possesses personhood, then you will believe that the absolute, or the reason why anything exists at all, is not personal. Okay,
That's a good point.
Okay, but what if I just don't know?
Well, then you would still be operating from the not God position then. Okay? You would be operating that it was impersonal, because to say that you don't know, you're still operating either implicitly or unconsciously that something's absolute. And if you do not accept that it's personal, then you accept that it's impersonal. Now, when the reason why you're an atheist is because you claim that you want a rational justification or evidentiary support that God exists. But that request for evidentiary support can only be meaningful in virtue of a model of reality where there is some fundamental absolute. So if you say, no, I don't accept God exists, I want you to provide evidence for God, then by default, you are operating from an impersonal absolute, even though you say, I don't know what is absolute. Okay? It's still impersonal. You may not know its properties or attributes, but you're accepting that it is an impersonal absolute. Because if you held to a personal absolute, you wouldn't be asking for evidence for God, would you? Because you already accept it. Okay?
That's actually a good point.
Okay, so you are already holding to implicitly that there is an impersonal absolute. Okay, so in atheism says, I do not believe in God because evidence has not been provided. But the problem is that statement is being spoken of from a model of reality for with the impersonal absolute as the basis of the system, but you don't have evidence for it. So you're operating from you understand? So the atheist position is intrinsically violating its own principle.
How so?
Because the atheist is not operating from a position of neutrality. Either when you speak and reason in your system, your worldview, you are operating that the ground of all being, why anything exists at all, is either personal or not personal. There's no neutrality for that. Now, somebody may be not aware of this in their thinking, but it can be brought to their awareness in conversation, and that's what I'm doing right now. So you believe, either explicitly or implicitly, that there is something that's fundamentally ultimate and absolute and explains, whether you know it or not, why anything exists at all. And that's what we call the absolute or the ultimate. And everything else that is not absolute will be dependent or derivative. So a marshmallow is a dependent entity. A cat is dependent, it is derivative. The moon is derivative. Stars are derivative. We are derivative. We're dependent because every single one of those things begins to exist. So when the atheist comes along and says, wait a minute, I don't accept your God claim. See, most atheists today will not assert there is no God. A minority will. But most atheists will say, no, atheism is simply the rejection of the God claim. Well, let's examine that. If you don't accept the God claim, that's not a position of neutrality. Because if you do not accept the God claim, you're not accepting that the ground of all being, that which is absolute and ultimate, is personal. So then you are not operating from or speaking from a non-system. You're operating from a system that there's a reason why everything exists. And since you don't accept the God claim, the reason why everything exists, the absolute or the ultimate, will be impersonal. So you believe in an impersonal absolute that provides for why you are here. And then from that position, you say, I don't accept the God claim because you haven't given me a good reason or evidentiary support. But you see, since you already do believe in an impersonal absolute, what's the evidentiary support for that? Well, the answer is you don't have one. And so to be an atheist is to be operating from a model of reality, either consciously or unconsciously, that the adoption of that model of reality is in violation of your criterion of belief. Your criterion of belief is, I will believe in God, the personal absolute, the ground of all being, when you give me a rational justification or evidentiary support. And in the absence of that, I say, nope, I don't accept your God claim. But you certainly accept the claim that there's something ultimate and absolute, because if you don't, then you have no basis for intelligibility for facts, because facts are going to require the ground of all being. Facts are going to require that there be something ultimate and absolute that provides for all things that begin. So you are believing in a system right now in your atheism that violates your criterion of belief.